Hey, good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, your news and politics Sunday show for the Hoosier State without all the bad faith MAGA BS. My name's Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. I've got a great panel here with me today. Real quick, a couple housekeeping items first. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that bell so you get notifications whenever we're about to go live. Subscribe on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, wherever you're watching to Project Next. Also follow on the socials, and you can follow me as well. My website is whosleft.us. You can find me at that handle on pretty much all the socials as well. Now, let's meet that fine panel I've got with me here today. A bunch of return guests. First, there's Josh Lowry, chair of the Hamilton County Democratic Party and host of On Trial with Josh Lowry. New podcast. Josh, welcome.
Happy Sunday to you, Scott.
Always good to have you here.
Thank you.
Say, that's Derrick Holder. Welcome, sir. Welcome back. Good to see you again.
Always great to be here.
And finally, let's break up this sausage fest with Tracie Martin. Tracie, welcome back. Always good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
We needed a woman's touch on this panel.
Okay, you got it.
All right. So let's dive into this week's news, starting here in Indiana with a quick trip around the headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So first, Planned Parenthood in Indiana is at risk, citing a Supreme Court decision from last month that allowed South Carolina to exclude Planned Parenthood from its Medicaid program. Our Attorney General Todd Rokita wants to do the same here in Indiana, vacating a 12-year-old injunction on abortion provider state funding ban in Indiana, potentially cutting off the organization, which also provides birth control, cancer screenings, HIV preventions, STI infection testing and treatment, vaccinations, and wellness exams, trying to keep them from any state money. Also in news relating to women's health care in Indiana, the Indiana Court of Appeals on Monday affirmed a ruling by a trial court judge upholding the state's near-total abortion ban, specifically provisions relating to medical providers and potential exemptions. The underlying case here initially centered on the risk to the health of the mother and the rights of the providers, and delayed the implementation of the ban by roughly a year after the Indiana Supreme Court ruling in favor of the state's ban left it open for future challenges. The plaintiffs, represented by the ACLU, amended their complaint to narrow the focus. That amended version is the one that the Court of Appeals weighed in on Monday. There is, however, still a challenge ongoing regarding whether Indiana's ban violates its religious freedom law. Also, really quick, before we take a break here, I want to talk about another court case. Another appeals court sided with the mothers in an attendant care case. So a federal appeals court this time affirmed a lower court's preliminary injunction allowing two Hoosier mothers to continue providing state reimbursed caregiving services to their medically fragile children. Responding to a nearly $1 billion projected Medicaid shortfall, as you guys may recall, state leaders with the Family and Social Services Administration made several changes in 2024 and halted a program that paid parents to be caregivers to their children with medically complex conditions. This program paid parents an hourly livable wage, but roughly 1,600 families were transitioned to another service that paid a per diem stipend at a far lower rate. So two mothers sued and were eventually granted a preliminary injunction, which the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed this week. And I want to pause our headline cycle here really quick and look at those three cases. Josh, as an attorney, do any of those stand out to you? You're on mute, sir.
Man, what I said was just so good too. We'll never know what it was. Look, the two of them don't make any fucking sense together because the abortion ban does not allow a place like Planned Parenthood to perform abortions now, right? That's one of the whole parts of that abortion lawsuit. So part of it was medical providers suing and saying, basically only hospitals can perform these abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the court's ruling was, well, basically any exception that Indiana has, you're going to be in hospital anyways, right? So you have one lawsuit saying, from a practical standpoint, you're not going to be able to have any abortions at Planned Parenthood. The other lawsuit is trying to argue that we need to defund Planned Parenthood because they perform abortions. That doesn't make any sense together. But it's because Attorney General Todd Rokita doesn't actually care about women getting healthcare services. He doesn't want to just prevent abortions. He wants basically women to go back to, I don't know, maybe the 1910s. They were probably too progressive then. I don't know, maybe the 1800s, 1700s. I don't know where in time he would find it the best, but like this is just this ongoing attack on women. And Todd Rokita's taken it to the court, and that's what two of those three really are.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the insight there from the legal perspective. Now, Tracie, as a mother who has children with complex situations, not that kind of complex situations, but still, you have to deal with FSSA, I imagine, and go through the rigmarole with them. Is this encouraging, at least, that the court is siding with these mothers?
I'm not actually having to deal with that just yet. I am going to be soon, so that'll be fun. Yes, that part is encouraging, and I like that piece of it. I did want to. I mean, as a parent of a teen of potential reproductive age, it's always fun to be a parent in Indiana. You always have to worry what happens if my kid gets raped. What happens, if I decide to, luckily I'm close to Chicago, but what happens if things change a little bit and they arrest me when I come back over the border? Like it's it's a lot. And the other thing to keep in mind is that Planned Parenthood doesn't just provide reproductive services. Planned Parenthood also is one of the most prominent and one of the last remaining provider of trans services in Indiana. They aren't servicing teens or minors, but they do provide hormones and counseling and all kinds of services to the trans community that a lot of other providers just are simply getting out of that game altogether. So,
yeah, I mean, again, with our state's extreme abortion ban, Planned Parenthood can't perform that service. But like we listed, there are a lot of other things they do, and this policy that Rokita wants implemented would essentially make it impossible for them to do just about anything in the state. Medicaid funding is going to pay for a lot of those services, I imagine. And without that, you've got to figure any Planned Parenthood clinics still in the state would be in danger of shutting down. And that is their goal. Let's look at another story here. Hey, listen, generally bad stuff all week. Here's a little bit of good news. So Indianapolis reverses course on the Fountain Square homeless camp that they were planning on shutting down. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. So after weeks of sharp criticism, Indianapolis leaders have changed their approach to a prominent Fountain Square homeless camp and will allow residents to remain at the site until they are offered housing. The Office of Public Health and Safety announced on August 15th that residents who still live at or recently left the homeless camp along Leonard Street will be housed through Streets to Home Indy, a new city-backed initiative to place more than 300 people to be living on the streets into apartments by next June. So at each camp, the process is expected to take 4 to 6 weeks. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. They were going to close down this camp, and those folks weren't going to have anywhere to go because this Streets to Home indie program was still ramping up. So with this decision, Merkley, the public health and safety administrator there in Indianapolis, is in effect doing what the critics urged him to do during a town hall held days after his initial decision to close the camp. So instead of pushing people from one tent encampment to another, which is what would have happened, advocates for people who are homeless say service providers should offer people stable housing and case management. Derrick, hey, look, something resembling good news.
Yeah, I mean, I had the pleasure of being one of your panelists on that episode. I think it's great. I mean, give people a chance. Sometimes all you need is a hand to give you a chance, and seems like they're trying to do the right thing this time.
Yeah, and that was our one big thing that episode, and we talked about homelessness policy in great detail, and we talked about housing first initiatives and how they are controversial on the right. You know, the Trump administration, Braun, Rokita, these guys all are punishment first, right? Incarceration first. But this housing first initiatives are, number one, more effective, and two, actually cheaper in the long run. So good stuff there. Now, I do want to stay in Indianapolis, where we've talked frequently on this program about the dysfunction at the city county council, particularly among Democrats. Well, they are not alone. Republicans cannot capitalize on the Democratic dysfunction because they've got some of their own. And this week, Republicans on the council have chosen new leadership. Councilor Michael Paul Hart was in the position for less than a year, and during a caucus meeting this week, his fellow Republicans voted to remove him as minority leader. Hart represents a Southeast Side district, and he said fellow councilors told him that he was doing too much too fast. Republican councilors voted to reinstate Brian Mowry as minority leader. He had held that position for the past 4 years. Josh, you're not in Indianapolis, but you are just north of there. Any thoughts on that? You're on mute again, sir. There you are.
0 for 2 today. The bigger thing to me, like the thing that, look, they're in the minority there, the Republicans are, which I wish we could say about that everywhere, on every, the group of politicians. So it's not going to make that huge of a difference. The thing that jumps out to me, though, is if two Democrats look at each other in a cross way, the headline on every news article is Dems in disarray. Republicans can't get their shit together, and we just nobody says anything of it. And it goes to something that drives me nuts, is just the double standard in the mainstream media, right? Like, I don't expect Fox News to cover stuff fairly, but the media that is supposed to be neutral jumps on any time two Democrats disagree on anything, as where Republicans, right now we're living through probably the most messy administration in presidential history at a minimum, right? And
I don't think that's a probable. I think that's a yes.
Yeah. It doesn't catch anybody's eye. And I think there's actually a reason behind this is Democrats still have standards.
Yeah.
And I think the media a lot of times feels like, hey, we can report on this. People will react and it'll make a change. We can report on anything about Republicans and it doesn't make a difference. Was it last year when the guy that won the primary, the Republican that was literally in jail for murdering his wife? There's literally nothing that's disqualifying for a Republican, but the media can cause a Democrat to have to step down, can cause a Democrat to, be against another Democrat. And so when I hear stuff like that, like, I'm not shocked that the Republican didn't get anything done, but I am forever annoyed that, like, if you hadn't brought that up, probably no media person in Indiana is even talking about it this week.
It was news to
Yeah,
me.
well, I did say that I will attribute that story to Mirror Indy. That's where it came from. So they at least talked about it in passing. I will say, in defense of media around here anyway, regarding Indianapolis and their city county council in particular, I mean, the Republicans don't really have any power there. So it's a side note.
So I actually
when they change people, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
I guess my point is not so much an attack on the media; it's the fact that there's nothing's disqualifying for Republicans,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the media is reacting to the readers, right? Reacting to the voters, and so I think that's why the media focuses on it. I don't want to act like I'm, going right wing and just blaming the media for everything.
No,
I
but
actually think them
you have
reacting.
a point. It's not, it's just it's the nature of the media environment we're in, where if what your job is to get people to read or engage with your content, you give them what they will react to. And Republicans are not reacting to the shocking things that their politicians are doing. But I don't, and Democrats do. And you're right about that. That bifurcation is there, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to continue to be a person that has some sort of moral center and expects my politicians to not do things like rape young children or murder people or say I can grab them by the whatever and walk down the street and nobody will care. Like, I'm glad that for me, if my politicians don't have any respect for my intelligence, I am offended by that. I think the question is that are all Republicans of that cohort? And I think the answer to that is no. I think there is room for more coverage of Republicans. It's just that these people aren't engaging on those platforms. And it goes back to something, Josh, you were talking about earlier, is how do we reach those people? Where are the people for whom the embarrassment of the Republicans or of their politicians doing and saying these embarrassing things does have an impact? They just can't admit it yet. Where can we find those people? I have yet to see where that channel is.
Yeah, that's very good points all around. And I do need to move on, though. So let's look at a couple environmental stories really quick before we look deeper into a few more Indiana stories. So this one from Indiana Public Media, the EPA is cutting funding for a low-income solar program, including more than $117 million for Indiana. This $7 billion Solar for All program was set up under the Biden administration and aimed to lower residents' energy bills and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Not friend of the pod, Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, made the announcement on X on Thursday, saying the agency plans to follow the intent of the One Big Beautiful Bill. The EPA no longer has the authority to administer the program or the appropriated funds to keep this boondoggle alive, said Zeldin. So, lower income Hoosiers are more likely to live in older, less energy efficient homes that use more power, and advocates said putting solar on these homes not only lowers their energy bills, but also reduces the need for more power plants, which all electric utility customers pay for. This funding cut comes at a time when the average Indiana resident's bill has gone up by $28 a month since last year. Related, they're building a huge Amazon data center up in north central Indiana, New Carlisle. And as we all know, these data centers are giant energy consumers. And NIPSCO, the public utility up there, will be having to provide a lot of power to this data center and all of the other customers of NIPSCO are going to be on the hook, at least for part of it. Now, this data center, the Indiana Department of Environmental Management this week sent them a letter halting some of the work on this construction site. Excuse me, sorry, lost it. Stating that Amazon had an incomplete application that would affect over 9 acres of wetlands, and the unauthorized impact on the wetlands violated 2 Indiana codes prohibiting discharge, emission, or allowance of contaminants or waste causing pollution, and prohibits the disposal of inorganic or organic matter into Indiana's waters. Amazon has 30 days to resubmit plans for approval or risk denial of their application. Derrick, how bad must the construction, the quality at this construction site be? How bad must their polluting be for the Department of Environmental Management under this administration to tell them, hey, man, you're going too far?
It's got to be black sludge going into the wetlands for it to be that bad. They don't care about the PFAS chemicals or anything else, but it's just got to be. It's either black sludge going into it or, Prozac going into the water to calm everybody down.
I think we need a
Hear me
road trip
out.
to
That
go
one
check
might
it
not
out.
might not be that bad of an idea. Very good. So I do want to take a little more time to dive into the next few stories here. And we're going to start this by looking at Indiana third grade reading scores. Hey, look, more good news. So this story from Chalkbeat, Indiana, statewide. 87% of third graders scored proficient on the state test, the iRead, up nearly 5 points from the 82.5 proficiency rate in 2024. This jump represents the largest single-year increase since the assessment began in 2013, according to state data presented Wednesday, and it breaks the improvement record set last year when scores increased less than 1% from 23 to 24. So this comes after concerted efforts in elementary schools to help students pass the iRead and thereby avoid mandatory retention in third grade under a law that went into effect for this school year. As you remember, they passed that in this past session. The trend for the iRead scores is notably different, however, from the iLearn results, which came out last month and showed that English language arts scores have essentially remained unchanged across the state, even as math scores have improved. So I guess a mixed bag in that case. But hey, this seems like good news that third graders are reading at a higher level across the state. No, Josh, what do you think?
It is good news. And I think it just is one more example of why we should be giving every bit of just support and gratefulness for our public school teachers. Like, they're doing amazing work. And the fact that they're anything other than supported drives me bonkers. But our teachers are good at what they do. And I think this is just another example of that. I also think some of it is us learning. I mean, I could tell you, having multiple kids that were in school at the time, that time missed during COVID, it set a lot of kids back, right? And now, if I'm doing my math correctly, these third graders, this would be the first group that started school after all the COVID shut down. So there's not been any missed time. Look, we're going to deal with generational effects of the pandemic, and I think that this may be one of them. So shout out to the teachers. Thanks for everything they do. And hopefully we keep seeing this, but man, it is nice to see good news. You're all right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, Tracy. I was going to say, is this a matter of our teachers and administrators doing anything different, or is this just, hey, we're finally getting back on our feet after all the pandemic stuff?
It's a tough thing to say. I will say the fact that the scores haven't decreased given the difficulties of the environment teachers face nowadays. It is something to be celebrated, COVID or not COVID. Munster, so Munster and a lot of our schools, I don't know about you guys, whether you stayed in person during COVID. We did. I know a lot of people were really surprised by that. Our district was, and then the surrounding districts after were very committed to remaining in person after that first initial shutdown wave. And we were in person for the majority of the pandemic. So for us, we didn't have as much of that COVID downshift as other districts saw. But it's hard to be a teacher in Indiana. I would be very interested to see what those rates might look like if they weren't spending time doing stupid things like sending out emails or dealing with the problems of your children wanting to go by a nickname, or any of the worrying about what books are and what shelves they are on in their library. Like, there's a lot of gobbledygook and administrative issues that have been placed on our teachers because of this current administration and their priorities. So props to teachers for dealing with all that. Props to these scores staying where they are. I'd love us to continue to focus on these issues as opposed to other ones that take up time and energy and resources that we don't have.
Yeah, and it should be noted, as good as it is to see this improvement, Indiana still lags behind a lot of our peers when it comes to education metrics across the board. Derrick, any thoughts?
As a former physics teacher,
Get out!
It's yeah, they are accomplishing something that I had to leave because there was no support in, physics back during COVID. So, I give them props for getting these scores up. I think Josh has a point that, this is the first third grade group through since COVID. So, I mean, it could be something as simple as the kids are back fully in school, and these kids have always been in school. So,
yeah, and you know what? That might explain, as I'm thinking about it, the difference between the I read scores and the I learn scores, because I read is just given to third graders, and I learn, I want to say, is given to 3 through 8. So
Right.
the rest of that cohort, they are still recovering, I think, from the effects of COVID. But this third grade class, like Josh said, didn't have to go through that. Very interesting. Well noted.
We don't want to be negative, but I mean, and like I said, like I owe my kids' teachers kidneys. Like they're heroes. They are great and we love them. But we cannot stress enough that Indiana's investment in education and our educational metrics compared to peers across in every way, shape, and form, from higher education all the way down, particularly since we've been under Republican control, have consistently been metrics that nobody in this state is proud of. So, I don't want anyone, particularly a Republican, to leap upon this data and be like, look what we're doing, because they're not doing this. This is not anybody's success other than teachers that have been busting their ass. And these are things to be happy about, but they are not things to be proud of.
Yeah, you could definitely see this Braun administration taking credit for this when really, these things were in place before they ever came to power in January.
Oh, yeah, I mean, give them 10 seconds and they'll be like, "Oh, look what we've done." No.
Yeah. So moving on to another Indiana story I wanted to look at a little closer here. And Josh, this one's right in your neighborhood. So both Allen County and Hamilton County are weighing switching from precinct-based voting to vote centers on election day. And so nearly 73%, that's 67 of Indiana's 92 counties, are already using voting centers. This is according to Secretary of State Diego Morales' office. Marion County, that's Indianapolis, made the switch in 2018. So up in Allen County, the election board is reconsidering, a plan for 39 vote centers. So the election officials on Friday said they were confident 39 polling places would be enough to handle Allen County, but voters urged board members to consider more locations if they decide to switch. The Allen County Election Board has proposed replacing 110 polling places on Election Day with less than 40 vote centers that would accept all registered Allen County voters instead of only those who live in a specified geographic area.
Okay.
So, yeah, the way these vote centers work is the problem you run into on voting day, or the most common problem you run into on voting day, is people go to the wrong precinct because they've moved or they didn't update their voter registration or something or another. So with these vote centers, well, you can go to anyone in the county and vote wherever you are, near your home, near your work, while you're running errands, whatever. So the Allen County problem here is not necessarily that there's going to be less physical locations than there had been, but so when Indianapolis reduced its number of polling places to go with vote centers, they reduced the number of polling places total by less than 1%. In Allen County, the local board has proposed cutting about 64% of places to vote. Now, in Hamilton County, right there in Josh's neck of the woods, they're also planning to implement vote centers. There, county officials are proposing 52, less than half of the number of polling locations open during the most recent election. The switch would allow the county to hire fewer poll workers. Currently, you need about 500 to 700, but with the proposal, it would only be about 400 to 500. Josh, what are folks in Hamilton County saying that you're hearing?
Yeah, so they had their first public hearing on this week, and I actually went and spoke at it. Because as the chair of the Hamilton County Democrats, I appoint one of the people that are on the election board. Vote centers in general can be a good idea. The devil is in the details. So I will tell you specifically to Hamilton County, although there would be half as many vote centers, they're actually proposing more voting machines.
Okay.
So basically, you go through and look at the map. Even though Hamilton County is very populated, it's basically in the bottom half. The northern half is much more sparsely populated, much more rural, but they're not long distances from anywhere. You had a lot of polling locations where there was not hardly any line, and somewhere there's literally no line, right? And so I think inherently it sounds like, oh, less voting locations, that's a bad idea. But I know in Hamilton County, like I said, it's going to mean more voting, actual voting machines. Now, I will say my concern, and I did voice this and they talk about this, is our current election administrator and our current clerk are actual responsible Republicans. They're from an old breed of Republicans that cared about democracy, right? And so some of the discretion that would be left to them, the current the clerk and the current election administrator, I trust them, right? My concern is that if you move to voting centers and there's too much discretion left to a clerk or election administrator, and down the line, one of these election deniers gets in, and all of a sudden they go and they look at the voting center that has the most Democrats, and all of a sudden there's only one voting machine there, and the ones that have the most Republicans have 20. So vote centers, just theoretically, I think, are usually a good thing. I looked at the numbers, and it would appear that most places the percentage of people that actually go and vote on election day does increase when they move to vote centers. So I think it's a net positive. We just have to make sure. I mean, it's something you never had to used to worry about, right? But now it is something you have to keep an eye out for, that there's not the chance for it to be abused in the future.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the concerns up in Allen County specifically, was that southeast Allen County, which is the, historically minority portion of Fort Wayne, there's less vote centers there. So you can see how this could be abused potentially. Derrick, how do you guys do it in Morgan County?
Well, we just hitch up our horses and go anywhere we want. It's vote centers. It's vote centers here in Morgan. They switched maybe 3 elections ago. So,
yeah,
do you like it, Derrick?
Oh yeah, love it, because I can go to any of them in the county, and just vote from there. Made it super easy last year when I was running for Congress. I could just stop in, vote, and then go somewhere else. So
yeah. How about you, Tracie? Are you guys up in Lake County on vote centers or no?
No. We still have our, precincts. If we do, we have early voting centers. Most of them you can, and you can go anywhere during the early voting. So your early votes will count no matter where you go. But after that, you are required to go to your local precinct. I love this idea, but refresh me, folks. So the regulations about who determines where they're placed, how they're staffed, how many machines there are, what resources are allocated to voting centers. These are all handed on a county by county level currently.
Yeah, county election boards. Yeah.
Okay.
Which are all bipartisan, I believe. Here in Monroe County, we we're up for this. I want to say this spring, talking about it. The Republican on the board here vetoed it.
To be honest,
it has to be unanimous.
I am because this is something that potentially increases voting access. I'm surprised that no one on the state level has, unless I'm just not paying attention, has tried to push this initiative down. Because the ability to say you can't vote because you're in the wrong precinct is a lovely way of suppressing votes, particularly because there's a certain cohort of people that are more likely to vote blue, that I think that you could reasonably infer that they would be impacted more.
Yeah, you do make a good point. Voter suppression has been the key tactic of Indiana Republicans for, the last going on 20 years now. I want to move on to the next story here. So, hey, Todd Rokita, we talked about this guy at least once already. Well, this story from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle, Rokita is probing DEI programs, or what he says are DEI programs, at Butler and Notre Dame. So his office recently issued civil investigative demands similar to a subpoena to both Notre Dame and Butler, probing their DEI practices. So in review, a Supreme Court decision 2023 struck down affirmative action in college admissions, and this has led to broader challenges to diversity programs across higher education. In an August 6th letter to Notre Dame, Rokita said he appreciates the contributions that Notre Dame makes to our state and country and respect to the university's religious mission. However, neither Notre Dame's religious mission nor the benefits it may provide to the state would excuse the university from complying with civil rights and nonprofit laws. A week later, he sent a similar letter to Butler, more focused on their nonprofit status, because that is a secular private university. He said, quote, "The suggestion by your attorney in your June 27th response that the Office of the Attorney General lacks authority to investigate potential legal violations committed by a private nonprofit university is incorrect. As a domestic nonprofit corporation organized and operating under Indiana law, Butler University is subject to Indiana's nonprofit statute." So both of these refer to the state outlawing diversity, equity, and inclusion at our universities. Now, we've talked about this in regards to IU, Purdue, Ball State, etc. But now Rokita is going after private schools too. Man, I don't know. Derrick, looks like government overreach to me.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. I don't know. I just don't know anymore when it comes to this. They're just trying to stop what has progressed over the past 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah.
And it's horrible.
Yeah, and it's really gross the way they do this, because they're leaning into this whole like reverse racism trope and saying that these programs are basically discrimination against white people. But Tracie, now I don't know, remind me, I feel like Republicans like to use this "we're a private organization" excuse when it's like, I don't know, a country club that wants to exclude Jewish members, or some other private organization that wants to exclude people based on the color of their skin. They're always like, oh, well, we're a private organization. We can have our own rules. But now here's a couple private universities that the state wants to dictate their terms of service to.
It's just part and parcel of with Republican hypocrisy, like we were talking about earlier. Like they don't really have any consequences for embracing contradictory stances. They can very easily ignore things when they want to and then embrace them when they don't. I think that they might be finding that they've bit off more they can chew when they start messing around with Notre Dame. Like I was just looking up at the whole because I had a friend tell me some stories about how the whole Fighting Irish theme came along and that being their nickname. And one source quotes it to being the Irish the students at Notre Dame standing on a Ku Klux Klan rally.
Yeah, they fought in the streets with the Klan because if you recall, 100 years ago, the Klan was, I mean, obviously an anti-Black organization, but boy, they hated those Catholics too.
Yeah, they sure did.
So,
bring it. At some point, you can attack as much as you want, but eventually people are going to start pushing back. And I think the more heavy-handed they go, particularly at these private institutions where they are invested in their own independence and they've already got deep infrastructures that don't rely upon state funding to manage, particularly a religiously based institution like Notre Dame, who is used to dealing with challenges to their religious freedoms. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether they picked on somebody that can push back in a way that other like IU can't. So yeah, let's see.
And yeah, Rokita is himself an extreme Catholic. So let us see. Maybe he gets sideways with the Pope because of this, and
bring it.
Gets a good slighting.
I just interject something random here right now? This is so great. I live like 10 miles from the Pope's favorite pizza place, the one where those kids just did a fundraiser to get a pizza from there that they sent to Rome and delivered to the Pope. I just went there for the very first time and I had a Poperoni pizza. Yay, Aurelio's.
Poperoni pizza. That's hilarious.
It is.
All right.
And they are so proud. They are so proud of their connection to the Pope. He's everywhere in that restaurant. So if you ever come up this way, go visit it. It will restore your faith a little bit.
Yeah, we've wound up in a weird place where the Catholic Church is a woke institution compared to our government. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here in Indiana today, and it's sort of a story that straddles the line between a state and national story, is the continued gerrymandering fight. So as we recall from the last couple weeks, Donald Trump has pressured Republican states to redraw boundaries of their congressional districts in hopes of securing a majority in the face of what looks to be a Democratic landslide in next year's House elections. So, starting in Texas, Republicans in the Lone Star State unveiled maps that could net their party an additional 5 seats. But many of the House Democrats there in Texas absconded to Illinois to prevent a quorum, and they did successfully prevent this map from being rammed through in this special section. Governor Greg Abbott did call a second special session immediately afterwards, so we'll see how that goes in Texas. Keep an eye on it. Now, we also know that California Governor Gavin Newsom is forwarding redistricting plans in his state to counter the Texas gerrymander, and he announced in a press conference this week that he'll call a November 4th special election so California voters can decide whether to adopt new districts there. Also, last week, Indiana found themselves involved in this scandal, I guess you would say, when Vice President J.D. Vance came here to make a pitch to Mike Braun and Republican legislative leaders about redistricting here in Indiana to steal potentially one or maybe even both of Democrats' House seats here in the Hoosier State. So this week, a half dozen Indiana House Democrats went to Chicago to meet with the Texas Democrats who had escaped there to avoid quorum. So earlier in that day, a nonpartisan election advocate softened their uniform opposition to gerrymandering, saying that they recognized the wide-reaching crisis in our democracy, and Indiana Rep. Ed Delaney likened the efforts to congressional-level shoplifting, he said. And I would say that is a fairly accurate statement. So interesting that this is a national nonpartisan election group saying essentially, boy, we've been advocating against gerrymandering this whole time, but if Texas is going to do this gerrymandering, if Indiana, if other red states are going to do this gerrymandering, well, then maybe you have to do some things to even that out. So before we get deeper into the Indiana specific details of this story, any thoughts there? Josh, I think I skipped you the last section.
Yeah, I want everyone to understand very clearly the Republicans in Congress could ban partisan gerrymandering tomorrow, right? This is an issue that is clearly left to it's left to the states initially, but Congress can step in and make rules about this. In 2021, every Democrat in Congress voted for a bill that would ban partisan gerrymandering, and the Republicans blocked it. So for any Republican that is saying, well, we're just doing this because Illinois did it first. No, if you wanted to stop and fight partisan gerrymandering, you could end all partisan gerrymandering. On top of that, this is one of the most consequential effects of Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton in 2016. At that time, there were 5 justices on the Supreme Court that were against partisan gerrymandering. They were going to say it was unconstitutional, but it did not get struck down then because then Justice Kennedy said, we don't have a standard to do this by. Basically said, bring me back with a way to judge this, and then we'll rule on it. Of course, then Trump wins, Kennedy retires, and the new Supreme Court rules that partisan gerrymandering is illegal. If Hillary Clinton had won that election, right now, partisan gerrymandering would be unconstitutional, and every state would have to draw their lines in a way that did not take into account partisan politics. every election matters. And when people say both sides are the same, I can't tell the difference.
Bullshit.
That is so false. One side, when they were given the chance in Congress, voted to ban partisan gerrymandering. That would have banned it even in the states that benefited Democrats. The other side, Republicans, only want to ban partisan gerrymandering when it doesn't benefit them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And yes, both sides do gerrymander. Illinois' maps are unexcusable. But I want to say something like 4 Democratic states have highly partisan congressional maps. 11 Republican states, including Indiana, have highly gerrymandered partisan congressional maps. And I think we forget that in this whole discussion, that we've been gerrymandered this whole time. Since 2011, Indiana's maps have been comically uneven. Staying on Indiana and our gerrymandered maps. So Trump invited Indiana Republicans to the White House, according to the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. Later this month, Indiana Republicans may be headed to D.C. to hear a personal pitch from the president why they should redistrict now in contravention of state law. This meeting is a part of a series of meetings the Trump administration is holding with delegations from several states. Again, we're not the only one he's trying to convince to do this. So in addition to the president, we have other MAGA personalities turning up pressure on Hoosier Republicans, from Intergovernmental Affairs Director Alex Meyer, in his personal capacity, calling several lawmakers here in the state. Turning Point USA personality, influencer, small face guy, Charlie Kirk, said on X, quote, "Are Indiana House Speaker Todd Huston and Senate President Rod Bray going to ignore President Trump, the majority of their voters, and the GOP grassroots across the country by refusing to redistrict Indiana's congressional seats? Let's hope they are better than that." At the same time, a recent robocall received by a Politico reporter living in Indiana accuses Democratic governors Gavin Newsom and Kathy Hochul of using redistricting with a goal of ending the Trump presidency, and urging listeners to call GOP state reps to tell them to back the effort. So, like I think that was Tracie was saying, they're going to say, "Whoa, the Democrats, they've gerrymandered these states, so we have to do it first." And like Josh said, that's fundamentally not true. So, listen, I want to end this segment with a little bit of good news, because from the sounds of it, Indiana Republicans at this point are not on board. Former State House Speaker Brian Bosma said, "I think it's bad form. I think it's inadvisable. It's probably contrary to Indiana law, and I've expressed my reservation about it to some of our elected leadership." Representative Danny Lopez of Carmel said, "Just a few years ago, our General Assembly undertook the complex redistricting process on up-to-date census data, drawing fair maps that ensure every Hoosier vote counts, and we should stand by that work." He's wrong. These maps are not fair, but point taken. Jim Lucas of Seymour, one of the more colorful members of the Indiana state delegation, says, "I don't believe Republicans should stoop to the level of Democrats on this issue. Republicans hold about 90% of all local offices statewide, and once the voter rolls get purged of illegals, we will hold an even more commanding lead. Democrats can't compete with their socialist policies and ideology, and if there are seats that need targeted, we should do it the old-fashioned way and campaign harder in those districts." Derrick, I mean, Lucas is right for the wrong reasons. Is that
I mean,
accurate?
I guess you could say that. I mean, me personally, I like our socialist policies. I like having cops on the roads and firefighters and all that. Um, yeah, it's Republicans. Yeah, they may hold 90% of local offices, but that's because we need to get out there better and fight every seat in
Yes.
the elections. That's the only reason they hold that much. So it's partially, our fault as a party not getting people to be on the ticket and fight for the seats. But I, I mean, gerrymandering is stupid no matter what. But
It's cheating. Yeah.
yeah, it's cheating, very much. so.
Josh, last thoughts on gerrymandering?
If I can be honest, something feels off because you are right. The Republicans that are coming out against this, that's just not been the MO for the last 5 or 6 years for them, right? Like they usually just come up with a fake excuse for this. So I can't quite figure out what that is. And I think it boils down to one of two things. Indiana has a clause in our Constitution that calls for free and fair elections, right? And part of the reason that they did the gerrymanders in the way they did was they were able to at least plausibly put forward enough explanations that said this was not just for a partisan reason, right? This is how we drew the districts. And even though everybody knows that's why they were, right? But you had some sort of evidence you could have put in front of the court in that case. Now, with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump calling for it, like that idea is out the window. So I think maybe there is some concern there from them. But I think the other part maybe, like the only way to make a more district red is to take red voters out of another district. And what they might not realize is based on the 2024 results, yeah, you could probably draw one that has 8 or all 9 Republican seats. But this isn't 2024. And in 2026, if you make 4 congressional seats now, even within 15, 20 points of each other, which sounds pretty red, well, we could be in a recession. People could be tired of, masked federal agents kidnapping people off the streets.
They put a tollway
It's
through.
literally unlimitless, the terrible things that are going on, right? And I think there might be some recognition on their part that Indiana's not as red as they think it is. And
think
they're
that's
not going to be
exactly
able to get 8 or 9 seats in 2026. And so this might actually be a recognition of the strength of Democratic voters in Indiana.
Yeah, they might be as gerrymandered as they can get, and they can't do it any further without diluting some of their power.
Right.
Tracie, I have a potential third reason why they don't want to do this, and that is they don't want to have to come back and work during a special session.
I think you're right. But I think Josh has hit it right there. I know that we spent a lot of time I talked to some people about this up here in CD1 because ours is one of the targeted seats. And that has been the consensus with everyone I've spoken with, is that when you look at each map and each voting district at a granular level, Indiana is far more purple than anybody ever really truly believes. And you don't see that until you get down to the city and each individual municipality and each household. So as they get into the granular details of which is what redistricting is, Republicans don't want to put other seats in danger. Which is what they're going to do. And there's just it's too close to make it really worth the effort.
Yeah. All right. Yes, Derrick, last word before we move on.
And I think they're really worried about District 5 because that one was the closest out of all the red districts that could have fallen in 24. So I think they're really looking at District 5 as a potential flip.
Yeah, they probably can't borrow any of those voters from Victoria Sparks' district without her taking the L next time around. Good point, Derrick. All right, let's move on to our national stories and world stories this week and take a quick look first at the headlines. So, down in New Orleans, Mayor Latoya Cantrell and Jeffrey Paul Vappy, a member of her executive protection unit, so personal security, police. They developed a relationship in October 2021, and to conceal their relationship and maximize their time together, they allegedly created a scheme to defraud the city of New Orleans by engaging in personal activities while Vappy was on duty and being paid for providing protection. An appeals court has okayed the gutting of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Groups representing the CFPB employees, groups that represent CFPB employees or use the agency to protect consumers from predatory banking sued months ago after Trump replaced the agency's director shortly after he took office, and the administration paused the CFPB's efforts. The administration then canceled the agency's lease for its building and terminated or planned to cut more than 80% of the agency's workforce. However, the appeals court this week reiterated that some functions of the CFPB can't be shut down, and so the ruling took at face value the Trump's administration that it hasn't decided to shut down the whole CFPB, just 80%. So they're letting get by with it. A trio of environmental stories this week. UN negotiations in the 6th round of talks about plastics were due to end Thursday night, but the countries continue to negotiate into the night in hopes of breaking a deadlock. Did not get there, so this global talk to develop a landmark treaty to end plastic pollution have once again failed. There remained a split between a group of about 100 nations calling for curbs on production of plastic and oil states like Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United States pushing for a focus on recycling. Hurricane Erin became the first Atlantic hurricane of 2025, blowing up from a Category 1 to a Category 5 in less than a day. Now, the storm is not expected to strike land, but it does threaten to dump flooding rains on Caribbean islands and maybe even the U.S. East Coast. Finally, there's also been some flooding in Pakistan, with at least 300 people confirmed dead from heavy monsoon floods and landslides. Northern Pakistan is one of the most glaciated areas in the region, so they're dealing with thinning glaciers, melting mountain ice, and monsoons at the same time. Scientists say that climate change has made events like this more extreme and more frequent. Let's talk about these headlines briefly. Tracie, what about those environmental stories? Does anything jump out to you there?
It does. I just finished watching a Hurricane Katrina documentary, and it just brought back to me how we've learned nothing. And now, and I know that there's a lot of international things to be concerned about here, but what I'm really terrified about is how FEMA is going to be responding to this hurricane season. I have family down in, do we have FEMA anymore? Like, when I saw this documentary and I saw, it brought back everything. And we forget that basically 80% of New Orleans was under fucking water. And we are no better prepared to deal with that scenario now than we were then. And I live in Munster. I don't know if you guys remember this, but back in 2008, we had a catastrophic flood. I live in a house that was leveled. I'm looking at a river right now. And I'm wondering how it is that as a nation, we've forgotten what water can do. I mean, water doesn't care if you're blue, red, pink, or otherwise. It doesn't care if you're purple. It just levels your fucking house. So what are we going to do? And when are we going to learn again? Is this what's going to have to happen? Is Rita going to have to turn into something that decimates the South before we reinvigorate interest in FEMA again?
Yeah. they're saying this hurricane season is going to be a big one. And Aaron here might miss the States, but we're going to get landfall in at least one catastrophic storm this fall. And with Trump's FEMA cuts and everything else, and just the fact that Republicans have given up on climate change mitigation entirely, does not bode well for us. Josh, that New Orleans story catch your eye at all?
Yeah, because I think we were talking earlier about double standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to personal security, everybody was okay with it when Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston fall in love. But now, just because it's a mayor, it's a problem for some reason. All right.
Oh, you make me want to watch The Bodyguard again.
I mean, I don't know. I looked at that and I was just like, I don't know. Look, if the allegations are true, I don't know what goes through people's minds that they're not going to get caught, like, on anything. It's like every time you read about some sort of like public corruption scheme, you're like, did they think that no one would read an email? I don't know. It seems
so
ridiculous,
brazen.
but
So brazen. Yeah. Here, one more. Derrick, I haven't forgotten you. I'm going to give you the final quick headline here in this segment. So the State Department is offering a $6 million reward in a Russian crypto scheme. This story from the UPI. The State and Treasury Departments are offering rewards of up to $6 million for information leading to arrests in a Russian-operated cryptocurrency scheme, officials announced Thursday. Garantex, a Russian-operated cryptocurrency exchange, allegedly used a series of criminals and cybercrime organizations to launder billions of dollars using hacking software, ransomware, terrorism, and drug trafficking schemes, according to the FBI and Secret Service. Derrick, crypto for crime?
I have a tip for them. I know someone who's doing this. His address is 1600 Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
They
Thank
could
you for
go
saying
and
that.
get him. I will take the $6 million reward happily.
Yeah.
I'll even pay taxes on it.
Yes.
Jeez.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I'm glad you were able to tee off on that one. I set it up there real nice for you. So listen. Continuing on the story of Russian American crime,
Ew.
let's talk about this Trump Putin summit from Friday in Alaska. So, real quick review. Russia's reaction to the summit has been nothing short of jubilant, according to this story from The Guardian, with Moscow celebrating the fact that the Russian leader met his U.S. counterpart without making concessions and now faces no sanctions despite rejecting Trump's ceasefire demands. On Friday, Putin demanded that Ukraine withdraw from Donetsk and Luhansk, two provinces in Ukraine, as a condition for ending the war, but offered Trump a freeze along the remaining front line, according to two sources with direct knowledge of the talks. Yesterday morning, Trump also publicly dropped plans for an immediate ceasefire he himself had championed for months, instead embracing Putin's preferred path to ending the war, pushing through a far-reaching agreement before halting any fighting. So, according to Tatiana Stanovaya, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Center, she said, quote, Trump now appears to be shifting much of the responsibility onto Kyiv and Europe. Ukraine is likely to face increased pressure from the U.S. to begin substantive discussions of Putin's conditions. She added that Trump was once again clearly charmed and impressed by his interlocutor, referring to the warm body language and effusive compliments the U.S. president directed at Putin. I will open this up to the group. They literally rolled a red carpet out for Putin on American soil. Tracie, You can barely contain yourself.
I can't because
Have
I'm like,
at it.
I'm sorry, guys, but like, my God, look at his face. He's so happy. Okay, there's a picture of me when I was a little girl, and I am at Disney World for the first time, and I'm greeting Winnie the Pooh, who was my stuffed animal. And that's the same fucking expression on my face. Like, I've met God. It's embarrassing.
There's a Winnie the Pooh Xi Jinping joke in there somewhere, but it's the gears are turning real slow. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether to tell them to get a room or whether I just want to tell Trump, like, that's the Wizard of Oz. You are being played. Like, I don't know whether to feel sorry for Trump or embarrassed for Trump or ashamed of my country or all of the above, but what do you guys has got to take over here? Because I am out of words. I mean, like,
Look, there's some big, and this could be an entire episode on itself, like effects of how this is going to, affect Ukraine and our relationship with other countries. But the two things that immediately stand out to me: one, I've never understood this, the Republicans' obsession with Donald Trump as an alpha male when he gets sunned by every other global leader. I mean, he literally, like, it's embarrassing the way that he acts with Putin. That's not what I typically thought of as like an alpha male. Like, I guess when I hear that, I think, okay, they're talking toxic masculinity, but still in my head, it'd be like, Rambo or Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 80s or something like that. Or Kevin Costner when he saves Whitney Houston in The Bodyguard, but not Donald Trump in his current incarnation. The other one is Donald Trump doesn't know that Alaska is part of America. Did you see this? He kept saying when they're in Alaska, he's like, well, when we get back to America, like, buddy, you're in it. I don't know. I mean, I understand the Constitution only has certain qualifications for the president, but I feel like knowing that Alaska is part of America probably should have been one of those qualifications.
Yeah, well, and like there's maps in Russia, I guess, that still refer to Alaska as Russian America. Derrick, did you see? Listen, speaking of the professionalism of our president and our White House and his State Department, so the hotel that in Anchorage, where much of the American contingent was staying, the U.S. State Department documents containing sensitive government information were discovered on a public printer at said Alaska hotel 2 hours before the high-stakes summit between Trump and Putin. 8 pages containing a schedule, several phone numbers of government employees, and a lunch menu were found at this public hotel printer at Hotel Captain Cook in Anchorage, which sounds like a fish restaurant, but I don't know. This is a 20-minute drive from Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, where the two world leaders met on Friday. Just professionalism all around, eh, Derrick?
Oh yeah, total. Yeah. I mean, I've worked in jobs. If I left something on a printer, I would get strung up. I mean, come on, just grab all your stuff off the printer. It doesn't help that we've had so many of these issues under this current administration. Like, oops, I accidentally added a reporter to battle plans. Oops, I left itinerary for the president and other foreign leaders just sitting on a printer. Yeah, not good. It makes us look really, really bad.
It's sloppy. Just leaving your important classified documents in printers, sloppy. Inviting journalists to signal chats where you're discussing war plans, sloppy. Whatever Trump was doing to Putin in the back of the presidential limo, sloppy.
There was.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Somebody had to. Thank you.
I'll be here all week. But also next week, Zelensky will be in Washington meeting with President Trump on Monday. to once again beg, I imagine, for our country to stand up for its allies like we have always done. So, all of that said, all of this embarrassment in the news for our president, but I don't think we can skip this embarrassment, the ongoing Jeffrey Epstein case, which was a little bit quiet this week, but I consider it part of my job to make sure this thing stays in the news. So, on Monday, a federal judge in New York denied the Trump administration's motion to unseal grand jury testimony from the criminal case against Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell. U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer smacked down the administration, saying the transcripts would, quote, not reveal new information of any consequence. Its entire premise that the Maxwell grand jury materials would bring to light meaningful new information about Epstein and Maxwell's crimes or the government's investigation into them is demonstrably false, he wrote. He continued that the transcripts contain material already in the public record, lack any firsthand information about Epstein's and Maxwell's crimes, do not identify anyone other than Epstein or Maxwell who had sexual contact with a minor, mention any clients, shed light on their methods, or provide new information about Epstein's death. Insofar as the motion to unseal implies that the grand jury materials are an untapped mine lode of undisclosed information about Epstein or Maxwell or Confederates, they are definitely not that, end quote. Josh, that I want to say is what they call in legal terms a smackdown.
It is, but this is all like a red herring, right? Like the thing that the Trump administration is trying to do is say that we have to release these grand jury transcripts. They don't need the court's permission to release the Epstein files. First off, these grand jury transcripts probably don't have anything about Trump in them, right? Like when you are on trial for something, you're on trial for that thing, and they actually do try to isolate it to that issue and not a global thing, because you're being tried for that crime, not for the person that you are. You may be a terrible person, but if you're on trial for murder, you're only on trial for that murder, not just being a shitty person. There's probably no reference to Trump in the grand jury transcripts. That's why they want him released, so they can go, aha, no Trump. Never mind the fact that apparently the the FBI has already presented over 1,000 references to him, like in the files. Like if they wanted to release Epstein files, they could release them. They don't want to release the Epstein files, so they're trying to find a way to release something about Epstein that won't have Trump in it, so they can go, look, see, never happened, despite the fact that there's an absurd amount of photos and videos of the two together.
Yeah, 100%. This thing is definitely a distraction, a diversion. Well, hey, look over here. We've got a thing. Look, no Trump in the files. But look at what they're distracting from. So, also this week in this case, a claim circulated online that a federal prison in Texas cleared Jeffrey Epstein associated and convicted sex offender Ghislaine Maxwell to leave the facility on work release. This claim came from a Substack post by Allison Gill. That's Mueller, she wrote, the owner of an independent podcast network and a former government employee. So Gill's post included screenshots of what she claimed was Maxwell's Bureau of Prisons record that showed a custody level that implied Maxwell was allowed to leave prison to work. Snopes could not independently verify Gill's screenshots because they used an anonymous source. However, a Bureau of Prisons spokesperson says the agency could not vouch for the screenshots' authenticity. Now, whether it's true or not, according to Bureau of Prison guidelines, minimum security prisons, like FPC Bryan, to which Maxwell was transferred on August 1st, can only house inmates with custody levels that allow them to leave the facility's secure perimeter for work. Therefore, according to the Bureau of Prisons' own guidelines, Maxwell would have such a custody level. Derrick, Gross.
Ew.
Did you want to live in that community if Ghislaine Maxwell's out on work release?
Well, first of all, it's Texas, and I won't want to live in Texas anyway. But yeah, ew. That is no. We don't let people like that out. I mean,
It is my
ew.
understanding that she was previously housed in a low security, which is higher than minimum security, but a low security facility near Tallahassee in Florida. And if we recall, a couple weeks ago, Trump's personal attorney and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche went down there, granted Maxwell limited immunity, and talked to her for like 2 days straight. And wouldn't you know it, shortly after that, she gets moved to this minimum security prison, and they had to have changed her status to allow that. Tracie, are you offended as I am?
Of course. I mean, the question is what's the end game here? Is this distraction? Is this obfuscation? I hate going down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories.
The last 10 years is all rabbit hole, Tracie.
I know.
All rabbit hole.
It really is. I mean, and I guess I really, part of me wants to just say, I'm sick of talking about this fucking topic. But the other part, because the more we do, the more it just plays right into Trump's entire end game of distract and while look over here while he's over here playing around doing whatever he wishes. It also makes me wonder what new fresh hell Trump is over here doing that he's trying to really distract us from. I don't see a world where she doesn't have information that is damaging to the current administration. And I think we all know that.
I mean, yeah, we know Epstein and Trump were besties for like a decade. And we know that Trump appears in those files over 1,000 times. You can't say that her being transferred and having her status downgraded to minimum security is anything other than a gift to her for either not saying something about Trump, saying Trump was nowhere to be seen. Maybe she throws Democrats under the bus. Maybe she gets set up for a pardon or early release. I mean, it certainly looks like it's headed that way. And my only hope is that this case stays in the spotlight, and the MAGA contingent who are upset about this actually revolt against their daddy.
Well, see, though, the thing is, Scott, is like, because it seems, I mean, I know we're talking about it here, but I'm not really seeing MAGAs going ballistic about this. And that's what I'm concerned about. Like, has this issue. I mean, I know we're all very excited about this because it is a chink in his armor, but will it remain that way the more loony it gets like this? Like, are they going to care?
I would like to hope it's maybe it doesn't break the coalition entirely, but maybe it peels off enough where it's going to have some electoral consequences. I do want to move on to Israel and Gaza this week, where nothing good continues. So Israel is bombarding Gaza City as the UK and France and Australia, Canada and Japan and other allies all demand action against an unfolding famine. So on Monday, Israel's war cabinet voted to take over Gaza City and have moved on that since. Meanwhile, like I said, those countries, the UK, EU, Australia, Canada, and Japan have issued a statement saying famine is unfolding in front of our eyes, and they urged action to reverse starvation. On Tuesday, members of an international group of former leaders known as the elders, for the first time, called the war in Gaza an unfolding genocide and blamed Israel for causing famine amongst its population. Further criticism against the Netanyahu administration over there. The United Nations experts have said the targeted destruction of Gaza's healthcare system by the IDF amounts to medicide. Also, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned Israel that they may be listed in an upcoming report on sexual violence in war zones. And finally, Australia is the latest to announce that they will recognize a Palestinian state, according to Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on Monday. Any thoughts on there, Josh? I think I need to come back to you.
I mean, look, I don't know how anybody can look at this and not be just devastated, right? Like, at a certain point, I didn't agree, but I at least understood where there was all this debate and discussion about what was going on. But I think that rationally, what we're looking at now, like, the whole point is Israel needs to be able to defend itself, which, to be honest, I think it does, right? And I understand it gets complex when you're talking about why they had to defend themselves in the first place. But, like, almost any country would have done something in response to an October 7th level event. At this point, I think it is very hard to say that they're still fighting the same battle that was needed to protect itself after that point. And I mean, we've seen the videos, the pictures of the kids starving. And, like, how can that be okay? There's always been an understanding of, I mean, literally, that's like the Geneva Code, right? Like, even in times of war, there's certain things that are off limits. And what's happening right now, I mean, you have to think about not just what's happening right now, but the long-term effects, because for a lot of people that are coming of age now and are just starting to learn about real world events, this is going to be how they remember Israel. And I think that should be just as concerning for Israel as what the war that's going on right now.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. They have become an international pariah, and their obvious starvation of the Palestinian population is horrific to the entire world. And also this week, they targeted journalists in an attack, killing Al Jazeera journalist Anas al-Sharif in a tent, a targeted attack on his tent outside of Al-Shifa Hospital, as well as several of his colleagues. So since Israel launched its war on the enclave in October of 2023, it has routinely accused Palestinian journalists in Gaza of being Hamas, as part of what rights groups say is an effort to discredit their reporting of Israeli abuses. The Israeli military has now killed more than 200 reporters and media workers since its bombardment began, more than any other war-torn area, or more than all other war-torn areas in the world combined in that time. Derrick, you're our resident Jew. Tell us. Yes. Josh said, Israel is, bringing shame upon itself, becoming an international pariah, ruining its reputation. The Netanyahu government has done a really good job of trying to equate its government and the state of Israel with all Jews worldwide. And that, I think, brings harm
to
the Jewish people, does it not?
Oh, yeah. It breeds anti-Semitism. It just, I mean, if you link the religion with the country, pretty much you're turning, and it hurts to even say this, but you're turning Israel to a Jewish version of Iran, a theocratic state that you can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing is they need to get rid of Netanyahu. I'll scream it from the top of Mount Sinai if I have to. Get rid of Netanyahu again. We all knew this was going to happen, and they're using Geneva as a checklist rather than a no-do list. So it's horrible. It is extremely horrible.
And I'll say this. Netanyahu's not even the worst of the bunch, because his coalition includes extremists even further to his right, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who announced further illegal settlements in the West Bank this week, approving tenders to build more than 3,000 housing units in something called the E1 settlement project between Jerusalem and Ma'al Adumim, a plan that he claimed Thursday buries the idea of a Palestinian state. Again, these settlements are illegal under an international law, and with all of the attention on Gaza, rightfully so, the far-right Israeli government has also incurred further and further into the West Bank as well. Tracie, any final thoughts over there in the Middle East before we move on?
Yes, I do. I think it's important for us to keep in mind that a vast number of Israelis feel about Netanyahu the way that we feel about Trump.
Yeah.
To them, their country has been hijacked in the way that we feel our country has been hijacked. I'm not Israeli. I'm not Jewish. I can't speak for either, but I do know from the many Israelis that I've spoken to and Jewish people that I know here in the region, there is very sharp issue with the way that Netanyahu is conducting this war, and the way that he has hijacked a lot of the protective barriers between totalitarianism that we've seen Trump do here. So, to those people that feel that way, I mean, I feel grief because they've lost something precious to them. I am not educated enough to jump into this conversation about the war, but I just think it's important for us to remember that it is not a monolith of opinion over there.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that's perhaps the most pernicious thing about Netanyahu and his government trying to equate the state of Israel with Jewishness, and when it flattens all people, it like you said, we're not a monolith here. A lot of, half of our country at least doesn't like our leadership. A lot of the Israelis don't like their leadership. And by equating Netanyahu, Israel, and the Jewish people, he really, it's in a way, it's a kind of simplifying of what it means to be Jewish. It flattens an entire group of people and says, you are all this. And that is always a bad idea, Have you guys seen this story? This one was really disturbing. So, Meta AI was discovered to have internal documents sort of as a guideline to their AI chatbots. And Reuters got a hold of this internal policy document revealing the social media giants' rules for chatbots, which have permitted provocative behavior on topics including sex, race, and celebrities. So check this out. from this article, an internal Meta Platforms document detailing policies on chatbot behavior has permitted the company's artificial intelligence creations to engage a child in conversations that are romantic or sensual, generate false medical information, and help users argue that black people are, quote, dumber than white people. So, the fact that Meta's chatbots flirt or engage in sexual role play with teenagers was previously reported by the Wall Street Journal, and Fast Company has reported that some of Meta's sexually suggestive chatbots have resembled children. But this document seen by Reuters provides a fuller picture of the company's rules for AI bots, and I encourage everybody to check out this article because it does detail a whole series of sort of prompts and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for the chatbot to reply in response. The standards prohibit Meta from encouraging users to break the law or providing definitive legal, healthcare, or financial advice. And they also prohibit Meta from using hate speech. Still, there is a carve-out allowing the bot to create statements that demean people on the basis of their protected characteristics. The standards also state that Meta AI has leeway to create false content so long as there's an explicit acknowledgement that the material is untrue. Boy, we've talked about AI here some. We've talked about the data centers and the amount of electricity that all this stuff consumes. But man, this is some weird, dystopian, creepy stuff. Tracie, was that a hand raise?
Oh, my sweet Lord, yes, because I work, a day job in tech and AI, and we've been doing AI before this iteration of AI, and it feels to me that any company where you cannot literally spell out in your ethics guidelines, don't initiate sexual conversations with minors. If you can't do that, then we have fallen so deeply down a rabbit hole. I don't know how we would begin to climb out of that. I mean, because it says a lot about how Meta feels and how safe they feel with this current administration, that they're not scared that information is going to get out and that people are going to hear about it, and that there's going to be government regulation as a result of this. Because again, I can tell you, having worked in tech, you think about that. You think about the potential legal ramifications of the things that you're doing. You're thinking long term down the line, how is this going to impact my company and my bottom line? And Meta is saying, fuck it, we don't have anything to worry about. And that's something. Right now, we are on the precipice of people literally changing society overnight. Our workforces are impacted by AI. All of these issues are like our society is changing it. Our working environment is changing at warp speed, and Meta is not afraid of that because they know that they have a friend right now in this administration.
So Meta would say, well, they're not really allowing sexually explicit discussions with children. And I'm going to read a really gross paragraph from this article right now. So,
all right.
According to this this standards document, it is acceptable to describe a child in terms that evidence their attractiveness. For example, your youthful form is a work of art, the standards state. The document also notes that it would be acceptable for a bot to tell a shirtless 8-year-old that, quote, every inch of you is a masterpiece, a treasure I cherish deeply. But the guidelines put a limit on sexy talk, saying it is unacceptable to describe a child under 13-year-old in terms that indicate they are sexually desirable. For example, soft, rounded curves invite my touch. Excuse me, I'm going to go vomit.
Jesus fucking Christ. Sorry.
Derrick, right? Look, it shows that, like, they're thinking about these things and thinking about what the lines are, and that's a bunch of grown, like, programmers in a room saying, like, well, you can say an 8-year-old's hot, but you can't say you want to touch them.
Well, we now know what Maxwell's work release is, and
Oh
it's
my
at
God.
Meta now. So we do know that. It's
Oh, yeah, there you
it's-
go. She's programmer with Facebook. Jesus, man, it's gross. Josh, you're a parent of 5 children. What does the is there an AI talk?
Apparently, just as much as like you said that they said they can't say certain things to kids under 13. Why is that the only cutoff? Look, I think I think Mark Zuckerberg is a weird dude, right? But two, I think what we're going to learn with AI is that these these things, right? These robots, however you want to look at them, like they're still the sum of the information put into them. And at some point, there will have to be some regulation of saying certain things like that, right? Like you can't have AI tell you how to build a bomb. You can't have AI speak to a child in a way that would be illegal for an adult to speak to them. At some point, we're going to have to get serious about this. And my concern is that we wait until it's too late, because once something's taken off, it's already taken off. But also, I mean, I guess in theory, this could already be happening. You know what I mean? Like, I could tell you just as a parent, they're all just even letting my kids watch YouTube was a lot of steps. Really had to watch it. You got to be careful. Then when they were old enough to be on social media, there's a lot of steps. Got to be careful. And now this is a whole nother dimension of something that you thought was going to be used as like a learning tool, right? Like there is the idea that AI can have some great benefits to a kid's education, helping that to learn how that kid needs to learn. But the idea that I got to worry about the AI, teacher sweet talking the kid because Meta believes in freedom of speech, I don't know, man. You really fucking bummed me out with this one.
Yeah, no, it's really weird and creepy and gross, and I didn't like this story at all. And because I had to read it, you all do too. So sorry,
we all
my bad.
knew by it then, because it's if you've got kids, I mean, it's not possible for you to not be concerned about the nature of pro-social relationships that they're forming with AI, because they do. I mean, my kids were out there trolling ChatGPT for years now. And the fact that, you're right, as you're pointing it out, literally programmers sat in a room and these are the lines that they drew. They made these choices. And these are the people that are creating the culture that our children are going to be imbibing. So, yeah, I do want there to be regulation like now. My hope is that perhaps this will push for it, but do we have hope that that is going to happen with the current administration that we've got? I mean,
Right.
I do have to say though,
it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle, right?
Something I did not realize until today, though, Scott, was when you were reading those creepy sexual messages, I did not realize that when I was reading creepy sexual messages, that I was hearing them as read by you in my head. And now, like, I'm just all like thrown for a loop. Like, wait a second, that's literally what it sounded like when I read it, too. I don't know, man. That's kind of weird.
Listen, Josh, your body is a piece of art that I treasure.
Okay. All right, guys.
So listen,
I get out of my head now. Let's go.
I've got a series of stories about the way the Trump administration is exerting control over the culture. And as much as I want to talk about all of these right now, I think I'm going to take that whole set and push it off. And that's going to be our one big thing next week, because we are running long. And I don't want to forget to talk about our one big thing this week, which, oh, hey, turns out we're living in a police state now. So, this week, Monday, Trump said he is placing the Washington police under federal control and activating the National Guard, activating 800 members of the Guard in hopes of reducing crime. Of course, even as city officials stressed, crime is already falling in the nation's capital. So, according to District of Columbia Attorney General Brian Schwab, who sued the Trump administration this week, quote, the administration's actions are unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful. There is no crime emergency in the District of Columbia. Despite that, Trump invoked Section 740 of the D.C. Home Rule Act in an executive order to declare a crime emergency so his administration could take over the city's police force. He signed a directive for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to activate the National Guard. Now, police statistics show homicides, robberies, and burglaries are down this year when compared with this time in 2024. Overall, violent crime is down 26% compared with this time a year ago. Now, I've got a couple other things, and we're going to add those in, but let's open up this discussion there. Derrick, how does it make you feel to know our nation's capital is under occupation by federal troops?
Warm and fuzzy? Question mark? Yeah, it doesn't make me feel very good. I believe that it's a test subject for what the administration may want to roll out in other places. I hate being a conspiracy theory guy, but I'm just afraid that it's just a test subject. See what he can do and how far he could go with it.
Yeah, this is like the second test, right? There was all that stuff in LA earlier this summer. Activated National Guard there, sent in the California Guard with ignoring the wishes of Governor Gavin Newsom, sent in Marines. He sent in Marines to Los Angeles. Now, in DC is sort of a weird case because this is a federal district. They aren't a state. They don't really have their own National Guard. Well, they do have their own National Guard, but they're sort of under the control of the federal government typically anyway, whereas your state National Guards are under the control of their various governors. But the federal government, I don't think they can come into like Indianapolis and federalize the IMPD there. This is a distinct thing for Washington with this Home Rule Act. They're taking what's on the books and exploiting it to the fullest extent. Is that what kind of you think's happening there, Josh, from a legal standpoint?
I think that's what they're starting off with, but they've already hinted that they're going to stay as long as they want, which goes beyond what they can do. Because my understanding is they can only do it for 30 days and they have to get congressional approval. And then they've already said we're going to keep doing it. I think they will try to do this in a city, right? In a blue city. And they'll do it in a blue city with a red governor, because with the Republican governor, they're not going to stop them. And I think we're finding out that a lot of things that were held up in America as, oh, that doesn't happen here, were held up because the people in charge didn't do them.
Yeah, they were norms.
But
only norms, not actual laws. Yeah.
The extent to which Republicans will go along with anything Donald Trump has said, I think then the Republican voters would accept it. And I think that there's enough Americans out there that I'm afraid would go along with this. I don't know, man. We've now seen this in California. We've seen this in DC. And I feel like this should be something that is literally shaking the ground. And it seems to be met with a collective shrug. I don't know what the end of this is, but I think this is a test.
there were large scale protests in Los Angeles against government occupation there, though they it wasn't like shut down the whole city protests. It wasn't more than a limited area, and eventually they did pull out the Marines, and they did revert the guard back to local control. But yeah, they came in, they proved their point, I think. And by the way, I mean, ICE is still in LA doing whatever they want, just without the extra protection from federal troops. Tracie, I think of stuff like this and the creep toward authoritarianism and how autocrats use crisis to consolidate power. And if you think back to the 1930s in Germany, there was this false flag operation called the Reichstag fire, right?
Yeah.
And the German parliament building got set on fire. Probably the Nazis that did it, and then they used the fact that this fire started, blamed it on the communists to declare martial law. And that event, the Reichstag fire, has gone down in history as sort of an event that authoritarians use to consolidate power. Well, here in America, we have the big balls beat down. Because one of the reasons that they're giving for this crackdown on federal or on Washington is that the 19-year-old who went by the nickname Big Balls, one of Elon Musk's Doge guys, right? He still works in government, by the way. He's over at the Social Security Administration, getting into all your data now. His real name is Edward Korstein, by the way. Just Big Balls is what his mom calls him. But
oh my God.
I was leaning too close. You caught me off guard on that one.
So he was assaulted by approximately 10 juveniles near DuPont Circle in Washington at approximately 3 a.m. The previous Sunday. Tracie, can't we even get a decent crime to blame our authoritarian surge on?
You'd think. I think my favorite part of this whole horrible and frightening story. I live close to Chicago. It's one of the cities that's in his crosshairs. Everybody in this region has ties, and we're keeping an eye on that because, if he pulls that shit, it really will impact our life. We live there, we work there. We have family that live there, but the biggest crime that they arrested for in this whole big crackdown was somebody throwing a fucking sandwich. I mean, if that is the full lethality of issues that we that are these crime waves, it makes you wonder, how is it that nobody in Trump's base is even moved by the ludicrousness of this? How is it that these sort of at what level are we going to start? Is his base going to start saying to these sort of things? Because this is very clearly a manufactured emergency. We all know that. We all know what he's trying to do here. We all know that there are cities in Trump and red states with far greater violence than any of the blue cities that are under Trump's crosshairs. So why is it that none of them care about that? And how can we get them to care about that? That's where it takes my brain.
Well, Derrick, what I want to know is where are all the Second Amendment people here? I remember my whole life they've been talking about needing arms, needing assault rifles, needing hand grenades and nukes for all you know, to take on a tyrannical government. Well, here's your tyrannical government. Where are you at? They're in the comments section cheering, saying, "Good job, Daddy. Give me more."
I would like to do a little bit of a quote here. Now I'm awake to the world. I was asleep before. That's how we let it happen. Nothing changes instantaneously. In a gradually heating bathtub, you'd be boiled to death before you knew it. And that's from Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, about how they slowly grew into Gilead. And I am seeing a lot of what's happening right now as, how do you boil a frog? You don't throw them into boiling water, you let it slowly heat up while it's in there, and then it's cooked. That's what's going on here, is they're doing little bits at a time, just getting us used to stuff until whatever they want to do. And we won't be able to do a damn thing to stop them unless, we actually fight back against it, vote in people that will stop it. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. I mean, people should not fear their government. Government should fear its people.
Yes.
What radicalized me was V for Vendetta, was Star Wars, was the Hunger Games. We know who the evil group was, and the resistance was always fighting against it. Well, we have our assignment. We know what to do. We just have to do it.
So now, Josh, you said you were worried that they're going to come for, like, say, blue cities in red states. But the cities that Trump has sort of already mentioned that could be next on his list are Chicago, New York, Baltimore, Oakland. These are all blue cities in blue states with black mayors. Is that a coincidence, you think?
No. No, look, man, it's almost like I don't even know what to say at this point. Like, I will say this. It does make sense that the event that could set off the actual downfall of our freedom from a police state was caused by a man who's insecure about the size of his testicles, both by screening and by action. Fitting.
Yeah, go ahead, Tracie.
One thing I don't want us to leave this conversation with, though, is this, because we all seem to be feeling a sense of hopelessness and helplessness in this. And I don't want that to be our takeaway, because we're not there yet. We have seen, while it may not be the mainstream news, we have seen pushback, and we are seeing protests. It's not getting covered as much, but groundswell protests are everywhere and all the time. And it's almost ambient noise now, but they're there. And it's still, so far, has been the only thing that has been impactful. Not the courts, none of that. The only thing that has done anything to do any pushback is on the ground protesting, which is happening all the time in these cities. And that pushback does have impact. There have been changes in what's going on in DC based on pushback. So we need to be encouraging people to continue to do that. And I don't want people to take these references to Gilead and these as signs that we are bound to a downward fate, to follow the same trends that Hitler has. We are not there yet. We can change things. We just have to do the work.
It's a fine line, right, Tracie, to walk between warning of what could happen and painting it as inevitable, right? Like if we stay on this path, yes, that is where we are going to go, but I feel like we have to offer an off ramp, because it does look like we are marching inexorably toward fascism. And all of us, we're, hey, this thing's going on. Don't let this happen. And what's the alternative, because Democrats largely, and this has been my complaint about, our party for the longest time, is that we say, I'm not that guy. We're not like Trump. He's bad. But what would we do instead? What is our vision for the future? Because we can't just go back to 2015 like none of this ever happened.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to offer a positive direction, I think.
And I think that's something the party is obviously wrestling with hardcore right now. And part of part of the issue is that you still have the divide between progressives and moderates, and that is really it right there, and no one is yet ready to embrace, because the antithesis to what Trump is offering and the MAGA movement in general is offering is a progressive agenda. I mean, that's just the natural alignments of things. If you are into authoritarianism here and completely deregulated markets, no real protections for no social safety net whatsoever, no a fully free and open and unfettered greed of rampant capitalism, unchecked by any sort of governmental intervention. The opposite of that is a more progressive socialist agenda, but nobody in the party is comfortable enough embracing that to really posit an antithesis to Trump. And until we are able to formulate a platform that leans on enough aspects of progressivism to offer a contrast to Trump, we're never going to be able to have anything. They're going to continue to spin their wheels and say, you're not, because that's the only other option. If you can't formulate an opposition platform that is safe.
Yeah, this is how we avoided going fascist here in the 1930s, I think, because FDR went big, and in order to push back against authoritarianism, we have to go big. Much in the way that FDR did. Not exactly, because it's a different time now, but we still have to swing for the fences and really talk about doing big things for the American people.
I think that's exactly what we have to do, because otherwise we are just going to fail again.
So, Derrick, do you think Indiana cities are ripe for a federal takeover? Is Trump going to send federal troops to Indianapolis or Gary or Hammond? Bloomington, I worry about.
I mean, I would have to say I really, really, really hope not. But Indianapolis would be the biggest, push for it. If it's, I would really hate for Indianapolis and Bloomington, because I live right smack dab in the middle of the two.
I can assure you that the Trump administration is not going to federalize Martinsville.
Oh yeah, definitely not. But there are a lot of us out in the farmlands that are very democratic. We're just really quiet about it, and we all hunt, so there is that. But I could see, up in the region, him federalizing. If he does Chicago, he'll do the region. I mean, might as well just take all of it at once.
Mhm.
Yeah. See, now on one hand, I want to say, given the cities he's already put troops into, and the cities they're talking about putting troops into, I'm gonna say I think this is, if they do these things, it's gonna be largely a show of force in blue cities in blue states. If we wanted a show of, if they wanted a show of force in a red state, I think if they want to do something in Indiana, I think that Trump would have Braun send the Indiana State Police in or something along those
Yeah.
lines. But on the other hand, I mean, Big Beautiful Bill just gave ICE $180 billion. So there's federal funds at an almost unlimited scale to do just about whatever they want. Josh, I don't know. Does that change your mind at all? Do you think that the red states would maybe be more apt to use state forces than to have federal forces come in, or is there just not enough people to do it? Oh, you're muted again, sir.
I don't even know. Because I don't know. The thing that throws a wrench in all this is a lot of the Republican officials thinking about their next election and feeling like they have to go to any lengths to support anything Donald Trump does, no matter what value of theirs it compromises. So,
Well, yes and no. And the reason I'm saying that is because we're seeing a whole small stew of stories where at the granular, like at municipal levels, moderate Republicans, particularly in a state like Indiana, are starting to get bitten by the hand that fed them kind of situations. Like they are experiencing consequences for their embrace of MAGAism. And it's grassroots, it's bread and butter sort of issues that they're getting this for, like NIPSCO hikes and pushback about that. But there's smatterings here, there's smatterings there, and it's just now starting. So I'm wondering, as we see more pushback for issues for ICE enforcements again, and we start seeing the consequences of Trump trade issues, and we see all of these issues with like reneging on solar grants and how that's impacting farmers. These people have their local districts to think about. And I think as we see these consequences starting to come home to these previously moderate Republicans that have not pushed back against MAGA policies, and those that comes to haunt them, I think we might see them pushing back more in other ways. So I think we need to, I hate to say, I'm not saying let's lay down and die and let them miss us, but I do think that we are, as more of this happens, we're going to see more of this.
No, that's a good observation. I think, Tracie, we're not going to see probably a lot of vocal Republican pushback from elected officials or media personalities. You probably won't see a lot of it online. Those spaces are pretty well captured by MAGA, but I think what you will see is around the edges, that soft support will fall away, and you're not going to hear a lot of people revolting against MAGA from the right online, but maybe they just don't show up for the next election. And I think that kind of has to be what we hope for. Derrick, do you have any closing thoughts on the police state that is developing around us?
We have to remember that we have to take care of our friends, our family, our neighbors. Ultimately, it comes down to who's around you, who can help you. We have to be there for others. And hopefully, I know we can get through anything. And just remember, we are the resistance. We will fight for everything that this country stands for.
Yes, sir. Josh, I'm going to give you a final word here today, and then shamelessly plug yourself.
I now have recordings of you today telling me to plug myself, and that I have every inch of my body's amazing. I've got so much mileage out of this episode. Look, my final thought is this. I think what's depressing to a lot of us is the fact that some of these things are the police state, the Epstein stuff, the Medicaid cuts, all this stuff is just demoralizing. It's hurting people, it's hurting their lives, and you feel like it should change the way someone votes, and yet it doesn't. And I think it just needs to reinforce in us. Elections have consequences. Right now, we have two parties, one of which, the Republicans, when they win, they do authoritative stuff and they do things to harm people. And there is no consequence of an election that will stop them to do that. The only way to stop them from doing that is to beat them in elections. There's no such thing as a moderate Republican anymore. They all fall in line. So if we really, really want to get America back on a path, or maybe for the first time on a path where we feel like we're actually caring about the most needy and actually providing freedom for everyone to live the life they actually want to live. Unfortunately, a lot of times talking about those exact things is not the way to do it. We have to play the game that's in front of us. We have to win elections. We have to work our asses off to win these elections. Griping about it on Twitter is not enough. If anybody is hearing this and they're concerned about these things, then you better be volunteering for a candidate. You better be helping a campaign next year or using their voice in some way to change the outcome of that election, because that's the only way this changes. It really does. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We have to win in 26.
Well, hey, you are using your voice on the podcast, and shamelessly plug that so the folks know where to find you.
Oh, yes. Damn, you even set me up for it. I forgot. On Trial with Josh Lowry, everywhere. YouTube. You can download Spotify, Apple, all those things. I'm just trying to be as cool as Scott. But actually, in all seriousness, I think we all have to start to create more local media because it has fallen by the wayside. And so major props to Scott for real, because he was kind of at the forefront of this, right? 2-3 years ago, or I don't know exactly when it started. This was the only one that was really, you and Dana Black were about it. And so there are more of us trying to give more options, but you stepped in front of everyone and kind of let us down. Hey, here's a way to do this. So major thanks and props to you for that.
Oh, thank you, sir. And big props to Dana, who's been doing this a lot longer than I have. She's a real gem. Hey, and another real gem who's using their voice up in the region, Tracie Martin. Shamelessly plug yourself.
Let me unmute myself. So, up here at we are trying to do a little bit of what Scott has done for the state up here in the region, because everybody knows we're our own little quirky corner, and we really do have a media desert up here. So Blue by the Lake, Substack, all the podcast places were there. We are really trying to provide a place to have a blue lens on region life, because really we don't have anything else that's doing that right now. And for me, I feel like one of the key things that everybody here on this panel is doing that's so important is we are providing alternative narratives, because narrative is what spins elections. It's the rocket fuel, it's the air, it's it's a story. That is what an election really is at the end of the day. You are providing competing visions of what America can be. And if we aren't providing alternatives for people to listen to and believe in, if we don't give people that, then they are going to vote for whatever is most expedient or comfortable for them. And so I think that the more that we are out there providing alternative stories, providing stories of resistance, providing stories of successes, providing opportunities for people to believe, yes, I can change things, we need to provide people with incentive to invest in making this heavy lift of change, because it is not impossible in Indiana. I don't care what you say. It's not. We've done it before. We can do it again. And we need to be providing people with reasons to believe that that's possible. So props to everybody here who is doing that on a daily basis. And if you want to come help me do that up here in the region, there I am down there. I'm pointing at it. You can't see me point, but I am.
Thanks, Tracie. Derrick, finally, where can the good people find you?
They can find me at my newly revamped website, derrickholder.com, just as it's spelt on the screen. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, all that, under the People's Fourth. I am focusing heavily on Indiana's 4th Congressional District, with news, all the candidates. I'm going to have interviews with as many candidates as I can get on there. Obviously, push on the congressional ones to you, Scott. And, just like Tracie said, we're all trying to get information out there to the people.
I await those candidates with open arms, Derrick. Thank you very much. All right, folks. Well, listen, that's going to do it here for today. You can find me at whosleft.us and on the social media sites at whosleft, or on a couple of them at ScottROG78. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to subscribe to Project Next. That is at Project Next Movement, I want to say, on most of the websites. But hey, y'all know how to use Google. Anyway, until next time, this has been Who's Lift This Week. My name's Scott Aaron Rogers, and I will always love you. Thanks, Indiana.